She was just a virgin analyst, until the CEO took her heart and her body in one night. Morning in New York unfolded like a restless symphony. Car horns blaring, footsteps pounding against stone sidewalks, the aroma of fresh coffee mingling with the sweet scent of pastries drifting in the breeze. The Collins Media Group tower rose high, its glass walls shimmering in sunlight, a monument to prestige in the media world. Employees streamed in, polished and poised, suits crisp, heels sharp, coffees in hand, phones pressed tightly against their ears. Every step echoed professionalism. Every glance mirrored ambition. And then came Emma Collins. At 26, a newly hired junior researcher, she stepped into the lobby with an awkward sort of grace. Her cream blouse bore stubborn creases, her navy skirt had long lost its shine, and her ponytail was neat but not flawless, strands slipping loose against her cheek. In her arms, she clutched a small cardboard box, sealed hurriedly with tape. A security guard eyed the box suspiciously. "What's that, Miss Collins?" Emma flushed slightly, lowering her voice. "Just breakfast I made myself." But as she crossed toward the reception desk, the tape gave way. The box dropped with a muffled thud, its lid flying open. In an instant, homemade pastries scattered across the polished marble floor. One rolled all the way to the heel of an HR associate. For a heartbeat, the entire lobby froze. Then came the snickers. "Oh my God, who brings a bakery to work? Look at that. Heart-shaped cookies? Does she think this is a cooking show?" Emma knelt down, gathering each pastry, her fingers trembling but her eyes calm. Inside, she whispered to herself, "Don't shake, Emma. Breathe. It's just breakfast, not a battlefield." A janitor bent down, scooped up the last pastry, and handed it to her with a faint smile. "At least these look better than whatever they serve in the cafeteria." Emma let out a quiet laugh, nodded. "Thank you." Saida, she tucked the pastries back into the box, clipped her badge onto her blouse. Emma Collins, junior researcher. The elevator carried her to the 10th floor. When the doors slid open, the research division revealed itself. Stark white, muted gray, the unbroken hum of machines and relentless clacking of keyboards. No one looked up. No greetings, just silence. At the farthest corner, a small desk by the window stood waiting. Emma lowered herself into the chair, set the dented pastry box on the desk, and opened her laptop. She let out a long exhale. Beyond the glass, the skyline of New York lay shrouded in fog, faint light scattering across its edges. Start from zero. Find strength in the silence, she told herself. 10 a.m., 18th floor of Collins Media Group. This was the executive conference wing, a space reserved for high-level strategy meetings with partners. Plush carpets, golden light fixtures, abstract art lining the walls. The elevator doors slid open, and the entire lobby seemed to still. Adrian Blake, 32, CEO of Blake Innovations, one of the fastest-growing media tech companies in the country. His face had graced countless business magazine covers, often paired with headlines like "The Coldest Man in Silicon Valley" or "America's Most Unapproachable CEO." He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his dark hair slicked neatly, his gaze sharp and unyielding. The receptionist swallowed hard, leaping to her feet. "Good morning, Mr. Blake." "Good morning," Adrian replied, voice low but polite. He carried two things, a steaming cup of coffee and a small brown paper bag. "I have a meeting with Daniel, but first I need to stop by the 10th floor." The receptionist hesitated. "The 10th floor is research, sir?" Adrian gave a slight nod. "I know." when the doors opened on the 10th floor, heads turned instantly. A CEO of his stature almost never walked into the lower departments. Adrian moved with purpose, each step deliberate, until he reached the farthest corner, the smallest desk by the window. Emma sat there, hunched over her screen, typing data, unaware of the sudden shift in the room. Only when a familiar voice cut through the air did she freeze and look up. "Emma," Adrian said, placing the coffee and the bag on her desk. His voice was low, measured. "You've been ignoring my messages." The office buzzed like a hive. Wait, did he just call her by name? No way. Adrian Blake knows her? Emma blinked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I have a meeting. Daniel mentioned you were working here, so I thought I'd stop by." He slid the coffee toward her. "Almond milk latte, no sugar. Same one you had at the family dinner last month." Emma's cheeks warmed, though she fought to remain composed. "You didn't have to. I'm trying to keep a low profile, remember?" Adrian tilted his head, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "I'm just being polite. Besides, you're the first person who ever gave me directions at that party. To the restroom. Hard to forget." Emma let out an involuntary laugh. Hardly memorable. The atmosphere in the office shifted, whispers darting from cubicle to cubicle. Emma pushed the paper bag back toward him. "Thanks, but you should head to your meeting before the whole floor implodes." Adrian's gaze lingered, a spark of amusement in his eyes. "I'm going. But stop avoiding me. I'm not dangerous." "No, just irritating," Emma muttered. A quiet beat passed before Adrian chuckled softly and turned away. Every pair of eyes followed him until the elevator doors sealed shut. Emma's hand tightened around the warm cup, her pulse quickening. Yet despite herself, the corners of her lips curved into the faintest smile. Rumors spread faster than Wi-Fi. Just one day after Adrian Blake walked into the research floor with coffee and a paper bag, the entire 10th floor became an echo chamber, every whisper circling back to a single name: Emma Collins. Maybe they're distant relatives. Don't be ridiculous. Adrian Blake having family here? Or maybe she's trying to seduce him. Stares lingered, smirks flickered, keyboards slowed just enough to sneak glances at her. Still, Emma came in early each morning, brewed her coffee in the pantry, and settled into her corner desk. Sometimes, when she unwrapped her box of homemade pastries, the whispers grew louder. Pathetic. Who brings food from home to a place like this? She really thinks she's special. Emma didn't respond. She ate quietly, worked quietly, built her silence into a wall. But somehow, her calmness only provoked them more. One afternoon, with the office half empty at lunch, Emma sat alone in the pantry, slurping hot ramen. The door swung open. Zoe and Harper, infamous queens of gossip, strolled in, trading mischievous glances before planting themselves across from her. "Oh, ramen again?" Harper tilted her head, mocking. Zoe sneered. "No one asked you to lunch? Or are you waiting for Blake to show up with sushi?" Emma said nothing, twirling her chopsticks, letting the steam fog her glasses. Zoe leaned closer, her tone laced with venom. "We're just curious. How does a girl with no makeup, clothed straight out of high school, manage to catch his attention? Magic spell? Or maybe the pity act?" Emma's eyes flickered, but her voice remained calm. "I don't feel the need to answer questions that aren't sincere." Harper burst into laughter, clapping mockingly. "Did you hear that? She thinks she's profound." Emma set her chopsticks down, rose to her feet, and calmly dumped the noodles into the trash. Without a backward glance, she walked out. But in the hallway, she almost collided with someone leaning against the wall, coffee cup in hand. Adrian. His brow arched, his gaze steady and unreadable. "I heard everything," he said quietly. Emma exhaled, regaining composure. "I don't need rescuing." Adrian shook his head. "I'm not here to play hero. I just wanted to check if you're okay." "I'm fine," she replied shortly. "You always say that, but no one's fine when they're treated like they don't belong." Emma turned to face him, her eyes unwavering. "I chose this path, Adrian. I chose to start from the bottom. I don't get to fall apart because of a few cruel words." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Adrian set his coffee on the railing, leaning slightly closer. "Then let me be your personal barista, just to make mornings a little lighter." A soft laugh escaped Emma's lips, the first in days. "You sound like you're applying for the role of emotional support clown." "Clown works," Adrian shrugged. "As long as you smile." Emma shook her head and walked away. But this time, her steps felt lighter, and so did her heart. Wednesday afternoon. The 10th floor pantry buzzed with scattered laughter. Emma stepped in to pour herself some coffee and instantly felt the tension in the air. Zoe and Harper were already there, arms crossed, eyes gleaming like predators. "Well, well, look who it is," Harper announced loudly enough for half the floor to hear. Zoe smirked. "Got another box of homemade cookies? Or is today a new performance?" Emma ignored them, reached for the coffee tin, and stirred slowly. Zoe's heels clicked as she approached. "You think your silence makes you superior? Truth is, you're just a nobody trying to act mysterious, especially around Adrian Blake." Whispers flared outside the pantry door as curious faces peeked in. Harper added with a mocking laugh, "We've seen the security footage. He comes here, brings you coffee, pastries. What's your plan? Sleep your way to the top?" Emma lifted her gaze. Her eyes were cold steel. "If that's truly what you believe, then I only pity you." The words ignited Zoe's fury. She lunged forward, hand raised for a slap, but it never landed. A deep, icy voice cut through the room. "What exactly were you about to do to someone who matters to me?" The room froze. Adrian stood at the doorway, one hand gripping Zoe's wrist mid-air, his gaze as sharp as a blade. With the other, he pulled Emma gently behind him, shielding her. "Mr. Blake," Harper stammered, her face draining of color. Adrian didn't look at them. His eyes softened only when they found Emma. "Are you okay?" Emma shook her head faintly, pale but steady. At that moment, the pantry doors opened again. Daniel Collins entered, flanked by the head of HR. The atmosphere shifted instantly. "What's going on here?" Daniel demanded, voice like steel. Silence. He didn't need an answer. One look was enough. His eyes landed on Emma, then swept across the staff. "Zoe, Harper, HR is waiting for you. If you're not in their office within 3 minutes, I'll call security." "But we didn't," Harper stuttered. "You attempted to slap my sister in broad daylight." Daniel's tone was cutting. "That is unforgivable." Gasps rippled across the room. Every eye darted to Emma. His sister? Daniel Collins' sister? Daniel took a step forward, his presence commanding. "Let me make this clear once and for all. Emma Collins is not just a junior researcher. She is the rightful heir of Collins Media Group." The words crashed like thunder. A paper cup slipped from someone's hand, coffee pooling across the floor. Emma stood still, her fists clenched, her eyes glowing with sudden fire. Daniel turned back to her, his voice softening. You've endured enough. It's time they knew the truth. Emma inhaled deeply, then stepped forward. Her voice rang steady, calm, but resolute. I never wanted respect just because of my last name. But maybe today is the day I stop staying silent. And in that moment, everything shifted. After that chaotic afternoon, the 10th floor of Collins Media Group changed. Zoe and Harper vanished from the company overnight, and laughter no longer trailed behind Emma's steps. Instead, silence hung thick, heavy with curiosity and caution. Emma, as always, carried on unchanged. She still arrived early, brewed her coffee, and sat by her window desk. But one thing was different. Every morning, at exactly 8:45, Adrian Blake appeared. He wasn't loud, nor did he draw attention. He simply placed a cup of coffee on her desk, sometimes with a small bag of pastries, sometimes with a sticky note pressed to her screen. Don't forget to smile. You're seriously planning to show up every single day? Emma asked once, her eyes caught between irritation and reluctant warmth. Yes, every day, Adrian replied firmly. Unless you throw me out. Emma shook her head, half sighing, half smiling. You're the most annoying person I've ever met. Adrian shrugged. Annoying is just another way of being present. Gradually, his so-called annoyance became a rhythm. Each morning, Emma found herself anticipating the soft knock, the coffee placed exactly where she preferred. Though she tried to appear indifferent, she couldn't ignore the patience and quiet persistence behind each gesture. One evening, after turning him down countless times, Emma finally agreed to dinner. Instead of a glamorous restaurant, Adrian drove her to a small lakeside place by Prospect Park Lake. Warm yellow lights, wooden tables, windows opening to the shimmering water. It was quiet, intimate, far from the noise of the city. Have you been here before? Emma asked as they sat down. No, Adrian shook his head. I wanted my first time here to be with you. Emma fell silent, her heart skipping in spite of herself. They talked for hours. Adrian confessed he once considered leaving tech to open a Vietnamese sandwich shop, obsessed with street flavors. Emma admitted she had been journaling for 3 years straight without rereading a single page. When dessert arrived, a pre-ordered apple tart, Emma laughed. You remembered I always finish other people's desserts? Adrian's eyes glimmered. Some details are impossible to forget. On the drive back, the car slowed to a stop in the middle of Brooklyn Bridge. Why are we stopping? Emma asked. Adrian turned to her, his voice lowering. Because I need to say this somewhere quiet enough to hear myself. The night breeze swept through, the city glowing in the distance. Emma, Adrian said, meeting her eyes. I like you. Not because of your last name, not because you're different, but because when you look at me, I want to be better. Emma's breath caught. She inhaled slowly, then let out a small smile. And what if I said, I like you too? For the first time, Adrian's expression softened into a real smile. Not the practiced half-smirk of magazine covers, but something genuine. Then I'd do this. He leaned in and kissed her, gentle, unhurried, as if the world had stopped just for them. That night, both of them knew something had begun. On a May morning, the entire Collins Media Group gathered in the grand auditorium. Nearly 600 employees filled the seats, lights dimmed, the company's logo glowing across the stage. Rumors of an important board announcement had left the crowd restless with anticipation. Daniel Collins walked onto the stage, composed, microphone steady in hand. Thank you all for being here, he began, What I'm about to share is not just an appointment. It's a turning point in the future of Collins Media Group. He paused, eyes shifting toward the front row where Emma sat. For months, someone has quietly worked on the 10th floor. She never asked for recognition, never sought the spotlight. But in her silence, she has observed, listened, and understood the deepest truths about how we treat people. Daniel extended his hand toward the wings. Today, I am honored to announce the future CEO of Collins Media Group, Emma Collins. Applause thundered, rolling like waves. Emma stepped onto the stage in a simple white suit, her hair tied neatly, her eyes calm yet shining. Under the spotlight, she held the microphone, scanning the hall. "Good morning," she began. "Many of you may have seen me on the 10th floor. You may have thought I was just another junior employee. And you're right. I was judged for how I looked, for my quiet habits. I ate alone for months. I heard words no one should ever hear." Silence gripped the hall. Emma smiled softly. But those days taught me the most important lessons: humility, listening, and empathy. I cannot promise to change everything overnight, but I promise this: at Collins Media, you will be seen for who you are, not for what you wear or where you come from. The hall erupted in applause, loud and unrelenting. Emma bowed slightly in thanks. As she stepped down from the stage, a figure moved toward her. Adrian, in a navy suit, no microphone, no podium, just him. His eyes locked on hers. And then, before everyone, he knelt. The hall fell into a stunned hush. He opened a small velvet box, the ring glinting under the lights. "Emma," Adrian said, his voice low but trembling. "I've tried to impress you with coffee, pastries, and foolish jokes, but you never needed perfect. You only needed real. And here's the truth. I love you. If you'll let me, I want to love you for the rest of my life." Emma's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling. The hall exploded into applause and cheers. She nodded, unable to form words. Adrian rose, slipped the ring gently onto her finger, and drew her into his arms beneath the lights. No falling petals, no dramatic music. Just two people, once strangers, now each other's home. The wedding of Emma Collins and Adrian Blake took place in a small, old church on the outskirts of New York. No fireworks, no hundreds of strangers in fancy suits. Just family, a few close friends, and candlelight glowing through stained glass windows. Emma wore a simple white dress, her hair adorned with tiny flowers. Adrian, in a classic navy suit, wore a smile rarer and more genuine than ever before. When the priest asked, "Do you take?" neither hesitated. Their vows rang out steady and true, carried by the deep hum of the organ. After the ceremony, a small reception unfolded in the church garden. Wooden tables covered with white cloth, wildflowers in glass jars, simple dishes, but laughter in abundance. Clara, Emma's mother, watched Adrian carefully at first, but when she caught him fumbling with a tray of food, nearly spilling it, she sighed and chuckled. At least he knows how to do the dishes. Martin, Emma's father, stern by nature, was unexpectedly impressed when Adrian spoke of creating a scholarship fund for lower-level employees in the company. A man who thinks of others. Good. Very good. That evening, he pulled Adrian aside on the porch, poured him a drink, and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "If you can keep that girl smiling every day, nothing else matters." Soon, Adrian became part of the family. He helped Clara cook, though he often cried over onions or spilled spices. He played chess with Martin, lost every round, and laughed at his own defeats. He accompanied Emma and Daniel to their grandmother's grave, laying white lilies on the stone. quiet and reverent, as though he had been there all along. At Emma's small apartment, life shifted too. In the mornings, Adrian brewed coffee, leaving it on the table with a messy note. "Today will be okay." At night, when Emma stayed late reviewing reports, Adrian spread a blanket over her shoulders and set a box of cookies beside her. "How far do you plan to spoil me?" Emma teased once, half smiling, half scolding. "As far as it takes," Adrian replied simply. "So you never remember what it felt like to endure everything alone." And Emma realized, love didn't need noise or grandeur. It grew from the small things: a morning cup of coffee, a hurried dinner, a silent hand to hold. The news arrived on a spring morning. Sunlight spilled through the apartment window as Emma held the pregnancy test. 2 bright red lines. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands trembling, breath shallow. It wasn't fear she felt, but a tender certainty. She would no longer walk this path alone. That evening, Adrian came home after a long day. Emma didn't circle around the subject. She simply placed the test in his hand. He froze, staring for a few seconds. Then, without a word, he knelt, pressed his hand against her belly, eyes shimmering. "Thank you for carrying my whole world again," he whispered. From that day, life fell into a new rhythm. At every doctor's appointment, Adrian was there, his hand clasped around hers as the screen revealed a tiny figure squirming inside. The first time the heartbeat thundered through the speakers, Emma broke into tears, while Adrian laughed, wiping her cheeks. "Sounds like jazz drums," he murmured. "Perfect rhythm, son." When Noah began kicking, Emma winced at the sudden jabs. Adrian placed his palm against her stomach, eyes lighting up. "See that? He's sending us Morse code." Emma chuckled. "Do you even know Morse?" "No," Adrian shrugged, grinning. "But I'm sure he's saying, 'Mom, Dad, don't worry.'" Then came the sleepless nights. Emma tossed and turned, unable to rest. Adrian brewed warm milk, sat beside her, reading aloud from a book he barely understood, just to let his voice lull her. "Tomorrow will be better. Sleep, love," he whispered. On a snowy winter morning, Noah arrived. His first cry pierced the air, raw and powerful. Emma clutched his tiny hand, marveling at its fierce grip. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not from pain, but joy. Adrian stood frozen, his hands shaking, eyes wet, speechless, until the nurse placed the baby in his arms. "Hello, son," he whispered, voice breaking. "It's your dad." That first night in the hospital, Noah wailed endlessly. Emma held him to her chest, exhaustion painted across her face, yet her eyes glowed with light. Adrian stumbled clumsily with diapers, awkwardly mixed formula, until Emma laughed between yawns. "You look like you're in a relay race against the clock." Adrian kissed her forehead, grinning. "As long as our team wins." Back home, Emma refused to hire a nanny. "Our son is a gift no one else can replace," she said. Adrian agreed, rising at 3 a.m., to pace the room with Noah in his arms, whispering lullabies off-key until the baby calmed. One night, after Noah had fed and drifted to sleep against her chest, Emma stepped out onto the balcony. The moon hung bright, the air crisp. She wrapped them both in a thick blanket, inhaling deeply as Noah's tiny breaths rose steady, his small hand clutching her shirt. She lowered her lips to his forehead, whispering, "Noah, you don't have to prove anything. Just live true, work hard, and the rewards will come. No matter what happens, you'll always have us here." Noah stirred faintly, curling deeper into her arms. The safest place in the world. Emma had once believed success meant the CEO's office, the weight of authority, the prestige of power. But now, holding Noah while Adrian smiled quietly beside her, she knew the truth. Success was living honestly, loving fiercely, and building a family that would last. That winter, when Noah turned 1, the headquarters of Collins Media Group looked very different from the day Emma first walked in as a junior researcher. The sterile, gray, open space had been transformed. Plants now dotted corners, a small reading nook had been built, and quiet rest areas welcomed weary employees. These were Emma's first decisions as CEO. She hadn't wanted to start her tenure with a dry corporate memo. She wanted to start with a message that this company wasn't just a workplace, but a place where people felt seen and valued. Under her leadership, Collins Media Group not only maintained its position, but flourished. She launched training programs for overlooked staff, created a scholarship fund for employees' children from struggling families, and implemented mental health days. The press hailed her as the most compassionate CEO in media. But for Emma, the real reward wasn't in headlines or quarterly charts. It was in the light in her employees' eyes when they felt they belonged. One late afternoon, Emma sat in her top-floor office as the New York sky blazed orange with sunset. On her desk lay the quarterly report, numbers that had exceeded every expectation. She closed her eyes briefly, letting calm wash over her. Once I thought success meant reaching this office, but the truth is, success doesn't end at this chair. The door creaked open. Adrian stepped in, carrying Noah, now babbling happily. The boy's eyes lit up when he saw his mother, arms stretching out eagerly. Emma rose, gathering him into her embrace, the warmth of his small body filling her completely. "Is the CEO free for dinner with her family?" Adrian teased, resting a hand on her shoulder. Emma looked up at him, her smile tired yet content. "If you've brought the whole team here, how could I refuse?" They left the office together, the city's lights flickering on outside. In the car, Noah babbled, "Mama," then Dada, sending both of them into laughter. Adrian caught her gaze in the rearview mirror, pride shining in his eyes. "You know, every time I see you here, I still remember that morning you dropped the pastry box in the lobby. I never imagined you'd end up in the CEO's chair." Emma chuckled, pressing her cheek to Noah's hair. "Neither did I. But maybe it was those little stumbles that taught me how to stand steady." That evening, dinner was simple at their apartment. No expensive wine, no elaborate courses, just Adrian's clumsy attempt at spaghetti, Noah banging a spoon from his high chair, and laughter echoing through the room. When Noah finally fell asleep, Emma and Adrian sat by the window, city lights twinkling in the distance. Emma rested her head on his shoulder, her voice quiet but sure. "You know, I used to think I was strongest when I stood alone. But now I know. Real strength comes when you let someone walk into your world." Adrian squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you, Emma. Not just because you're a successful CEO, but because you've kept your heart intact through every storm." Emma closed her eyes, smiling softly. In that warm room, she felt whole. A brilliant career, a husband who never left her side, and a son who embodied their love. Her greatest success wasn't written in profit reports, but lived in these ordinary, extraordinary moments. Outside, the city raced on, but within the embrace of her family, time stood still. Emma knew with certainty, her journey had never just been about becoming a CEO. It had always been about finding home, a place where courage and love could live together. Years passed. The city still roared, But Emma's life had softened. After nearly a decade leading Collins Media Group and taking it to new heights, she chose to step down. Not out of exhaustion, but because she knew it was time to pass the torch to the next generation. On the day she announced her retirement, Emma stood before hundreds of employees, her voice steady and warm. Success isn't just numbers or titles. True success is leaving behind a place where people feel they belong. Applause thundered, yet Emma only bowed her head and smiled. From then on, her days belonged to her family. Mornings no longer meant back-to-back meetings, but driving Noah, now a tall teenager, to school. Along the way, they debated about music or the latest book he was reading. Once, Noah asked earnestly, "Mom, do I have to be like you, a leader, to be strong?" Emma shook her head gently. "No, son. Strength is living true to yourself, no matter which path you choose." In the afternoons, Emma and Adrian strolled through the park, hand in hand. His hair had silver strands now, but his eyes still gleamed like they always had. "Remember when you used to stay up all night over reports?" Adrian teased. Emma laughed softly. "Now I stay up just to hear Noah come home safe." On weekends, the three gathered around their small kitchen table. Adrian cooked, Noah set the table, and laughter filled the room. Emma often paused, watching the two men she loved most. She realized what she once thought of as the pinnacle of her life was now just a memory. This, family dinners, shared laughter, was the kind of success that lasted. That night, after Noah had gone to bed, Emma wrote in her old journal, "Someday, you'll ask me what success means. When you do, I won't tell you about Collins Media, the awards, or the titles. I'll tell you success is waking up with joy in the morning and coming home to someone who waits for you with their whole heart." Closing the journal, she looked up to find Adrian watching her. He clasped her hand. No words needed. In the golden glow of the lamp, Emma knew she had come full circle. Once underestimated, then a leader, and finally, simply a wife and mother. And every step of that journey had been its own kind of victory.